I always thought silence was harmless. After the cult, after the shouting and the chanting and the sleepless nights, I thought silence would feel like healing, like air returning to lungs that had forgotten how to breathe. But silence changes shape when you wait for someone who may never speak again. Every night at 11:03 p.m., I open the hotline. I sit at my kitchen table, cheap wood, soft lamp, the hum of a refrigerator older than my freedom, and I wait for voices trying to escape the same machinery that once swallowed me whole. Some calls last minutes, others hours. Most begin with a whisper, a few with nothing but breath. But every voice is a hallway back into the place I swore I'd never return to. And every confession reminds me that survival isn't a finish line, it's a balance beam. Last night, a young man was halfway through his story. The trembling kind, the kind you recognize even before the words appear, when the line cut out. I stared at the dead receiver and whispered into the dark, "Stay alive." And the silence that followed, it sounded like God picking up. I used to think survival made you strong, but mostly it just makes you careful. Careful with people, careful with promises, careful with the parts of yourself you no longer trust. That's the first thing listeners never hear through the phone, the quiet choreography behind my voice, the way I double-check the lock on the door before I sit down, the way I place my palm on the hotline binder, thick with case notes, hotline procedures, emergency discreet exit tools, like a ritual, as if touching it keeps me anchored in the present. People think running a hotline is heroic. It isn't. It's paperwork, protocols, breath control, and trying not to flinch when someone's sentence begins with, "I shouldn't be telling you this." My name is Lila. I'm 32. My kitchen table is my office, my sanctuary, and my confessional booth. I keep a glass of cold water beside me, not because I get thirsty, but because I need something to hold when the shaking starts. The line opens at 11:03 p.m. every night, not 11:00, not 11:05, 11:03. The cult I escaped from was obsessed with numbers. Everything had a meaning. 3 is a number they feared. They thought it represented divergence. Now I use it as my weapon, a personal rebellion, a reminder that I choose the rules now. Most nights, the calls begin slowly. A hesitant buzz of the phone, a nervous inhale on the other end. Sometimes I hear cars passing in the background, someone calling from a parking lot because it's the only place out of sight. Sometimes I hear nothing but pressing silence, someone testing the line, trying to decide whether to trust me with the most dangerous truth of all, that they're ready to leave. I don't tell callers that I'm a survivor, not at first. People assume that a shared wound makes trust automatic. It doesn't. Too much mirroring feels like manipulation, and I know that shape too well. Instead, I let them talk. The sound of someone telling their truth for the first time. It's delicate, almost holy. I treat it like a fragile object, something you hold with both hands. My voice doesn't sound like it used to. Before everything, my words were breezy, careless, thrown into the world without weight. After the cult, every sentence felt like walking through a minefield. I learned to monitor volume, tone, implication. Now my voice is something between the two, steady, with an undercurrent of something I can't quite name. Maybe grief, maybe stubbornness, maybe both. I run the hotline alone, though legally, technically, I'm supposed to be part of a larger network. The others handle the administrative calls, the easy ones, The "how do I get my cousin out of this weird group" type calls. I handle the midnight ones, the breathless ones, the ones where I hear fear shaped like a child's voice in an adult's chest. They call because they're trapped between two realities, the one they were given and the one they secretly hope might still be possible. I know that split. I remember when my own hope felt like contraband. The callers don't ask about me, but they sense something. A certain sharpness in the way I listen. A gentleness that isn't soft, but deliberate. You learn to speak without sudden edges when you've lived somewhere where every edge could cut. My job, if you can call it that, isn't to rescue anyone. It's to hold a light steady long enough for someone to see their own exit. People misunderstand the word escape. It sounds dramatic, cinematic. But escape is slow. Escape is sickening. Escape is choosing to lose the only version of yourself you've ever known and trusting that something will grow where the ruins settle. There are nights when the calls end and I sit alone at the table, hands trembling, the hum of the refrigerator filling the room like a ghost I'm too tired to argue with. There are nights I question why I do this at all. Why reopen wounds that barely scarred over? Why listen to stories that sound like distorted echoes of my own? The answer is simple, because no one answered my call when I needed them. I remember dialing a hotline at 19 from a borrowed flip phone while sitting on the floor of a gas station bathroom 2 miles from the compound I'd just fled. I remember listening to the ringtone, praying for a human voice. I remember when no one picked up. And I remember the silence that followed, the kind that feels like doors locking. So now, every night at 11:03, I pick up. No matter how tired I am, no matter how fragile I feel, I pick up. And if someone is breathing on the other end, even if they can't speak yet, even if all they can offer is silence, I stay. Because silence is a language, and sometimes silence is the first sentence of a confession. People imagine hotline work as dramatic, but most nights it's repetition. Names, ages, safety checks, grounding exercises, exit planning, state-by-state legal options. But within that structure, something raw lives. The part where the caller asks, "Do you think I can really leave?" And I say the same thing every time, the sentence that kept me alive. You already started. Because calling is the first step. Breathing through the fear is the second. Admitting the truth, even in a whisper, is the third. Tonight feels different, though. The air is too still. The house feels too quiet. A strange weight settles in my chest. A familiar tension I haven't felt in years. The sense that a story is about to begin before I'm ready to hear it. I open the line at 11:03. The phone rings exactly once. I answer, and someone exhales into the receiver, a trembling breath that sounds like a life unraveling. And then, very softly, a voice says, "I don't think I can survive this." I close my eyes, inhale slowly, and begin the work. People assume temptation is always seductive, a want, a hunger, a glimmer of something forbidden. But the most dangerous temptation in my world isn't pleasure, it's purpose. Purpose can pull you under faster than lust or greed or power. Purpose feels holy. Purpose feels deserved. Purpose feels like redemption with a pulse. And when you've survived something that rewrote your soul, purpose becomes a drug you can't ration. The night he called, I knew immediately he wasn't like the others. Not because his voice was deeper or younger or full of unspent panic, though it was all of those things, but because he paused before every sentence, as if trying to unlearn an invisible script. That pause was familiar. It was the rhythm of someone who'd been trained, literally trained, to monitor every word that left his mouth. Someone who'd been conditioned to fear his own voice. "Can you tell me your first name?" I asked. A longer pause. Too long. Then, "Evan." A lie, probably. Most first names at this stage are. But the cadence, the sharp edge around the syllable, that was real. He breathed in, shaky. "I don't know where to start." "You don't have to start anywhere," I said. "Just stay with me." As he spoke, my pulse matched his, uneven, braced, on the edge of something. He told me about the community. Never the word cult. No survivor uses that word in the beginning. It feels like betrayal, like naming a lover's violence before you're ready to let yourself believe it. He said things like, "They're worried about my spiritual path," and "I'm not sure I'm aligned anymore." And the one that broke my chest in half, "I think God can hear my doubts." I felt my fingers curling into the edge of the table. That was me at 19, terrified that God had secrets about me I didn't know yet, terrified that doubt itself was a kind of sin. I shouldn't have said what came next, but I did, because temptation always begins softly. "I'm here. You're not alone." That sentence, that small, warm, dangerous sentence, is how the trouble began. There's a feeling I used to get during my last months in the cult, a kind of fever inside the ribs, a need to be good enough, loyal enough, useful enough, to prove myself worthy of their love. I learned later that abusers call it devotion. Psychologists call it trauma bonding. I call it the hunger. And listening to Evan speak, I felt it come back. Not toward the cult I escaped, God no, but toward him, toward helping him, fixing him, saving him. My heartbeat sharpened into purpose, the same rhythm I once mistook for faith. He wasn't asking me to save him. He didn't even know if he wanted to leave yet. But I wanted it for him, fiercely, hungrily, recklessly. That's the temptation no one warns you about, the desire to rewrite someone else's ending because you never got control of your own. "Are you safe tonight?" I asked. Silence. Then the sound of a door clicking shut somewhere on his end. "I'm in the supply room," he whispered. "They don't check it after evening study." Not good. Supply rooms are liminal spaces, hidden but inside the walls of the system. They are where fear becomes physical. They are where punishment happens. My breath thinned. "Okay," I said softly. "Lower your shoulders. You're shaking." "How do you know that?" "Because I used to shake too. I shouldn't have said it. I never reveal that early. It gives too much of myself." But his voice, it cracked in the same place mine once did. And my own need, my temptation to be the person I never had, overpowered judgment. "What happened to you?" he asked. A question no caller is supposed to ask. I should have redirected, grounded him, pulled the focus back to safety. Instead, I whispered, "I got out." And I felt the shift immediately, the gravitational pull tightening between his fear and my memory. Temptation is the collapse of boundaries dressed as connection. I stepped too close, too fast, and he felt it. He told me about the spiritual hierarchy, the levels of purity, the quotas of confession, the leader who forced members to admit disobedient thoughts before sleep. Everything he said was familiar, too familiar, like someone had taken the blueprint of my past and photocopied it over his life. "They say leaving is death," he whispered. "They say the outside world will swallow me. They say doubt is the devil's way of testing if I'm worthy." My hand tightened around the water glass. That sentence, That exact sentence was once written on the wall above my bunk. "Evan," I said gently, "your fear is real, but their power isn't." He inhaled sharply as if those words hurt, or healed, or both. "I don't know how to think for myself," he said. "I don't know who I am without them." My throat closed. That was me. Word for word, that was me. I should have kept distance, but my own ghost, the 19-year-old curled on a bunk, begging God not to abandon her, pushed me forward. "You don't have to know who you are yet," I said. "You just have to know you deserve to find out." Another slip. Another line crossed. I wasn't guiding him. I was trying to pull him out with my bare hands, forgetting that hope offered too early can be a blade. After an hour, my notebook was filled with scribbles. Isolation, food restriction, punishment protocol, leader's role, family contact. But the real notes, the ones I wasn't writing, were inside me. The tightening resolve, the rising certainty, the old impulse whispering, "You can save him, you know. You understand him in ways no one else can. This is what you were meant for." That's the true temptation. The belief that redemption is a job you can complete, that saving someone else is proof you deserved to be saved. I told myself I was being rational, that I was following protocol, but pride had already slipped its fingers around my spine. I didn't want to be just a hotline worker. I wanted to be the one person who heard him clearly, the one voice strong enough to outshout his captors. I wanted to win, and the moment helping becomes winning, you're already falling. Near the end of the call, his tone changed, like he'd run out of fear and reached the fragile space beneath it. "Can I call you again?" he asked. My job requires emotional neutrality. We're supposed to say things like, "The hotline is always available," or "Someone will always answer." Instead, I said, "Yes, call me." 3 words, small, warm, fatal. He exhaled, a soft, disbelieving sound, and I felt something burn low inside my chest. A dangerous spark, the sense of being necessary, of being chosen, of filling a role only I could fill. "I don't trust myself," he whispered, "but I think I can trust you." And that was it. That sentence was the temptation. Not lust, not greed, not desire, but the sweetness of being believed in, of being needed by someone who is drowning. "I'll be here," I said, and I meant it, more than I should have, more than was safe for either of us. When the call finally ended, it was almost dawn. My apartment was cold. My spine hurt from leaning forward. My throat was raw. I sat there, staring at the dead receiver, and felt something rising in me like a tide. The urge to keep the line open, to wait for him, to anticipate his fear, to monitor my phone like a lifeline. This wasn't compassion. This wasn't empathy. This was compulsion dressed as duty. This was temptation disguised as purpose. Survivors carry a specific wound, the fear that if we don't save everyone, our own salvation was meaningless. That wound was pulsing, and I didn't stitch it closed. I fed it, because feeding it felt like belonging. And belonging, even counterfeit belonging, is the hardest addiction to break. I told myself I could handle it. I told myself I wasn't slipping. I told myself Evan was just another caller. But as sunrise hit the window, I realized something that made my stomach tighten. I wasn't just trying to save him. I was trying to save the version of myself I used to be.
the one no one answered. And that is how temptation hooks you.
Not with what you want, but with what you once needed. After that first call, sleep stopped being a place I went. It became something I negotiated with. I lay in bed with the phone on my chest, screen dimmed, volume up. Every small sound made my muscles twitch. A car door outside, a pipe in the wall, the ice shifting in my freezer. All of it in my half-awake brain became him. Evan calling, Evan whispering, Evan needing. By the third night, I stopped pretending I was resting between shifts. I was waiting. That's different. At the hotline, we're supposed to rotate cases. No attachment, no regulars. Names don't belong to us. We are bridges, not destinations. But rules are designed for people whose ghosts aren't on the other end of the line. I started working extra, unofficial hours. Logged on before my shift started. Stayed after it ended, letting calls roll through my extension instead of back to the general queue. When my supervisor sent out an email about burnout prevention, I skimmed it and closed it without finishing. The subject line said, "You can't pour from an empty cup." I wanted to scream. I didn't feel empty. I felt overfull, buzzing, alive in a way I hadn't been since before the cult, before my world narrowed to doctrine and punishment and the constant terror of spiritual failure. Helping Evan wasn't draining me. It was feeding something. And I didn't want to look at what that something was. He began calling 3 times a week, never from the same place. Once from the supply room, once from behind a dumpster near the laundry shed, where the wind cut his words into shards. Once from a moving van during a ministry outing, his whisper barely louder than the engine's growl. "I'm not supposed to be alone," he told me. "They say isolation breeds corruption of spirit." I bit back the laugh that wanted to escape. Isolation. That was their weapon. Group surveillance was just isolation in a crowd. "How much time do you have?" I asked. 7 minutes, maybe 10. I spoke faster. My notes turned frantic. Insomnia. Punishment room? Rededication rituals. His language slid between faith and fear, loyalty and terror, devotion and exhaustion. He would say, "They're just trying to protect us," and then 2 minutes later, "I haven't slept alone in 4 years." He didn't notice the contradictions. I did. I drew circles around them in my notebook, my pen carving hard enough to rip the paper. I wasn't just listening anymore. I was building a case. Not for court, for myself. For the part of me that needed proof that this was real. That I wasn't projecting my trauma onto some benign church community. I wanted this to be a cult. I wanted it to be as bad as mine. Because then, helping him out of it would feel like undoing my own history. My apartment started to mirror my brain. Dishes piled in the sink, each one a call I chose instead of washing. Half-finished mugs of tea sat in a loose constellation around the kitchen table. The trash can overflowed, a slow collapse of paper and plastic and food containers I couldn't remember eating. My plants sagged, thirsty. A thin layer of dust settled on the bookshelf I used to be proud of. Rows of rescue memoirs, trauma texts, spiritual reflections. Books I recommended to callers but didn't open anymore. I lived in the space between rings, between breaths, between his sentences. When friends texted, I let the messages sit unread. When my sister called, I let it go to voicemail. I told myself I'd call back when things settled down. They didn't, because I didn't want them to. Chaos felt purposeful. Exhaustion felt deserved. This was my penance, I told myself, for staying as long as I did, for the people I left behind. If I could help Evan get out, maybe that debt would shrink. Maybe my survival wouldn't feel so selfish. The first big line I crossed was small, on the surface. A detail. A sentence swallowed by minutes of conversation. He was talking about a discipline session, the way they made him stand in the center of a circle while the others took turns listing his failures. I thought about running, he admitted, just bolting for the fence. But I don't even know which direction the nearest town is. They only ever drive us with the windows covered. I knew that feeling. Knowing the world existed, but having no coordinates for it. Like being told there's oxygen, but not knowing which way to turn your face to breathe. How far are you from the highway? I asked. I don't know, he said. We always turn left at the big oak tree. Left at the big oak tree. I wrote it down. Then, before my brain could raise a hand and say, "This is dangerous," I opened my laptop and pulled up a map. Rural area, faith-based communities, properties with large parking lots and one main building. I wasn't supposed to do this. We're trained not to investigate, not to stalk, not to play detective. We are ears, not eyes. We are witnesses, not rescuers. But I zoomed in on the map anyway, searching for shapes that matched his description. Long gravel drive, 2-story main hall, small cabins out back. I found 3 possibilities. My pulse spiked. My hands shook with a familiar rush, the feeling I used to get before a group confession, when my fate hung in the leader's expression. Except now, I was the one holding someone's fate. And I liked it. There it was, the indulgence, the sweet, poisonous taste of control. It started as a hypothetical. They all do. If you did leave, I said carefully, if you had 10 minutes alone and access to the exit, what would you need from the outside world? He hesitated. Food, I guess. Money. Shoes that don't have our logo on them. I nodded, my brain already racing ahead. Could you get to the road? Maybe. His voice shrank. I don't know. I should have slowed down, brought him back to his body, grounded him. Instead, I pulled the map closer and traced a route with my finger. There's a bus station about 7 miles from one of the places you described, I said. If that's where you are, I don't know for sure, you'd head east from the main gate. There might be a service road. If you ever get the chance, just know it's there. I could hear my training screaming in the back of my head. Do not give specific escape directions. Do not guess locations. Do not create plans you cannot safely support. But the words were already out, hanging between us. He was quiet for a long time. I thought I'd lost him to fear. Then he said, "You really think I could make it?" I closed my eyes, saw a younger version of myself standing at a fence, fingers curled in metal, too afraid to climb. I answered her, not him. "Yes," I said. "I think you can." After that call, I didn't feel tired. I felt lit from the inside, every nerve crackling. I paced my apartment, barefoot, replaying his words, my words, the way his voice had changed when possibility cracked his world open a centimeter. This is what power feels like, I thought. Not the kind they had, the power to hurt, to shame, to control. Mine was different. Mine was righteous. Mine was good. I didn't notice the resemblance. Of course I didn't. I told myself I was balancing the scales, that every risk I took was a holy risk, that my lack of fear meant I was finally free of them.
But freedom and obsession can feel the same when you don't look closely. I started ignoring other calls. Not on purpose, not at first, but when the phone lit up with a new number, a different number, I felt a flicker of disappointment if it wasn't him. I did my job, asked the questions, logged the details, guided people through their panic, but part of me was scanning, always, waiting for his voice. Every night became a slot machine. Every ring a lever pulled. Every call that wasn't Evan felt like a near miss. And like any gambler, I kept playing. It was raining hard the night everything tilted. Rain on the roof, rain in the gutters, rain in my bones. The hotline phone rang at 12:41 a.m. Unknown number. My heart jumped anyway. "Hotline, this is Lila," I said. My voice sounded calm. Inside, something sprinted. There was breathing, fast, wet, wind in the background. "It's me," he said, and the way he said it, breathless, words punched out between steps. I knew before he told me. He was running. "Evan," I said, already on my feet. "Where are you?" "I did it," he gasped. "I left. I just walked out during evening singing. No one saw me yet. I'm at the back fence." The room spun. My kitchen table, my notes, my glass of water, all of it blurred into the sound of his shoes slapping mud. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not yet. Not like this. "Okay," I said, too quickly. "Okay, listen. You're okay. Keep low. How far is the road?" "I don't know," he panted. "It's so dark. I can't see the oak tree. I think I turned the wrong way." My laptop was already open. I stabbed at the trackpad, zooming in, searching for that long drive, that maybe highway, that rumored bus station like it was a lifeline. "Do you see any lights?" I asked. "Any buildings? Cars?" "Just fields," he said, a hitch in his voice. "I'm so stupid. I should have waited." "Don't say that," I snapped, sharper than I meant to. "You're brave. You're doing this. You can't go back now." Those words. I can't forget them. You can't go back now. It wasn't my place to say that, but I said it, because the thought of him turning around, of them catching him, of the story folding back into silence, it was unbearable. For him, for me. "Follow the fence line," I said. "There has to be a service road. There always is. Keep your hand on the wire. Move slowly. Stay low." My breath matched his. Short, sharp, like I was the one lugging my body through wet grass. Thunder rolled overhead. He flinched. I heard it in his steps. "Someone's gonna see me," he whispered. "They're gonna know. They're gonna know I doubted." "They don't own your doubt," I said, almost shouting. "They don't own your fear. They don't own you. Keep going." More footsteps, breath ragged, the slab of fabric soaked through. For a second, I wasn't in my kitchen. I was back in the compound yard, 19, staring at the perimeter, wondering if the world outside the fence was real or just another test. I wasn't guiding him. I was running beside him. I was running for both of us. "Wait," he said suddenly. "I see something. A road, I think. Or a ditch. I can't tell." He was breathing so hard I could barely hear the words. "Slow down," I said. "Describe it." "Gravel, I think. And headlights. Oh God, Lila, there are headlights." My heart slammed once, hard. On the map, a thin gray line cut past the property. Service access. Or maybe just a farm road. "Get low," I whispered. "Get off the shoulder. Go into the grass. Don't stand in the beam." His breath vanished. For a second, I thought the line had dropped. Then he whispered, so quietly I had to press the phone to my ear. "They're turning in." The words sliced me open. "Who?" I asked. "Describe the car." He didn't answer. I heard only rain, tires on gravel, the slow crush of wheels moving closer. "Evan," I said, my voice shaking now. "Talk to me. Where are you exactly?" Still nothing. "Evan?" And then, not a word, but a sound. A shout, far away. Someone else's voice, muffled. A door slamming. His breath came back all at once, ragged, wild. "They know," he hissed. "Someone saw. I have to." The rest of the sentence never made it to me. There was a crackle, a wet pop of static, and then the line went dead. Just gone. I stood in my kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, the dial tone humming like a flat line, my own breath loud and useless. That was the moment indulgence ended. The moment purpose snapped into panic. The moment I realized I might have just led someone to their capture. The moment the line cut, the world didn't go silent. It went wrong. Silence has shapes. I've learned this from years of listening. Some silences are heavy, some are guilty, some are waiting. But this silence? This one felt like falling through a hole in the floor. I stood there, still holding the phone to my ear long after the dial tone died. My breath had turned into something sharp, almost metallic. Some part of me kept whispering, "Call back, call back, call back." But I couldn't. The hotline system doesn't allow outbound calls. It's a protection, ours and theirs. Tracking someone in danger could risk their life. Interference could be fatal. Rules that made sense 2 hours ago now felt like chains wrapped around my wrists. I stared at the screen like I could will it to light up again. It didn't. I paced my kitchen until the dawn turned the window pale. The storm had ended outside, but not in me. My shirt was damp with sweat. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. Every sound, a car on the street, the neighbor's dog, the ice maker clicking, made my muscles jerk. I kept replaying the last thing Evan said. "They're turning in." Turning in? Into what? Into whom? Into where? My mind filled the blank spaces with every worst-case scenario. Punishment rooms, public confessions, forced repentance. I knew the rituals. I'd lived them. I'd survived them. But only barely. I pressed both hands against the counter and forced myself to breathe. I counted the inhales the way my therapist taught me years ago. 4 in, 6 out. It didn't help. My lungs ignored the math. At 6:12 a.m., the official hotline phone rang. Not my personal line. The main one. My supervisor's number. I should have answered in my normal voice. Cool, calm, professional. But my voice came out strained. Thin. "Hotline, this is Lila." "Early check-in," she said casually. "You logged off late. Everything okay?" I stared at my notebook, at the scribbled maps, the circled clues, the escape route I never should have given. I slid my hand over the page, hiding it even though she couldn't see. "Yes," I lied. "Just long night. Anything we need to escalate?" My throat tightened. She meant, did anyone attempt something dangerous? Did you break protocol? Did something happen we need to report? I said the second lie. "No, nothing unusual." She paused, like she heard something underneath my voice, but she let it go. People hear exhaustion in hotline workers all the time. What they don't hear, what I prayed she didn't hear, was guilt. "Get some rest," she said. "Seriously, don't push yourself." I hung up and stared at the wall. The lies sat heavy in my stomach. I hadn't lied like that since the cult, but survival breeds familiar habits. The second day was worse because nothing happened. No call, no message, no return ring from an unknown number. I kept the phone beside me at all times, charging cables stretched across the floor like a tripwire. I carried it into the bathroom when I showered. I held it while brushing my teeth. I tucked it into the waistband of my leggings when I cleaned the kitchen for the first time in weeks.
The absence became a noise, a hiss in my ear, a pressure behind my ribs. A hotline worker's nightmare isn't a bad call. It's no call. The silence where someone used to be. By evening, I convinced myself he was safe. Maybe he hid. Maybe he pretended he'd gone out for air. Maybe the headlights belonged to a random farmer, not his captors. Maybe he was sleeping, exhausted in a ditch somewhere. Hope is a manipulative thing. It lets you build entire worlds without evidence. It lets you imagine safety where none exists. It also lets you ignore the sound of your own unraveling. The worst part wasn't fear for him. The worst part was what his disappearance woke up in me. Flashbacks don't always arrive like movie scenes. Sometimes they're smells, sounds, textures. I couldn't hold a metal spoon without remembering the taste of the confession hall. Cold air, cold words. I'd walk past the hallway mirror and see my 19-year-old face instead of 32. Hair tied tight, eyes red-rimmed from forced prayer, mouth trembling from the last time I told the leader I was ready to change. One night, I startled awake on the floor beside my bed, my nails half-mooned into my palms. For a split second, a terrifying, disorienting second, I couldn't remember where I was. I thought he'd caught me. He, the leader who held my soul in his hands, the man whose rules lived in my spine for years after I left. I tasted the old fear again, the metallic, nauseating kind that coats your teeth. I whispered to myself, "You're safe. You're in your apartment. You're safe." But the room didn't feel like mine. The walls felt too close, the air too thin. This is the part of descent no one glamorizes. How easily the past can reach through time and take your throat in its fist. On the third day, I stopped pretending I wasn't spiraling. I sat on the couch, laptop open to the same map, refreshing the screen even though nothing could possibly change. My hands hovered over search bars I knew better than to use. Name of rural cults near... deleted. Missing persons case. Deleted. How to report a possible... deleted. You can't report someone missing if you don't know their real name, or their exact location, or even if they are missing at all. All I knew was a voice, a fear, a story, a flawed belief that I could save him. And that belief, the one that used to make me feel powerful, now made me sick. I told myself I had no proof he'd been caught, no proof I'd made anything worse. But blame doesn't need proof. It just needs space, and I'd given it the whole apartment. By the fourth day, I stopped eating full meals. My body rejected anything heavier than crackers. My stomach clenched at random, like it was bracing for impact. I walked from room to room without purpose. I sat on the couch for hours, staring at the phone, afraid to blink in case it rang. And underneath all of it, beneath the fear, beneath the exhaustion, beneath the grief, there was a deeper, more dangerous voice whispering, "You caused this. You pushed him. You crossed the line. This is your fault." I didn't argue. I didn't resist. I just let the voice speak, because part of me believed it. Part of me always will. The fifth night at 11:03 p.m., my ritual hour, the phone rang. Not the hotline line,
My own phone. The number was blocked. My breath froze. I answered without thinking. Evan? But it wasn't him. Not exactly. What I heard first was breathing. Then, softly, "Are you the woman from the hotline?" My stomach dropped through the floor. It wasn't Evan. It was someone else. Someone with a voice too calm, too steady. I swallowed. "Yes," I said slowly. "How can I help you?" A long pause, then, "I need to talk to you about a member of our community." Cold swept across my skin. My teeth clenched. Which member? My voice was barely audible. Another breath, almost a sigh. "His given name is Jonathan. I believe he may have contacted your organization under a false identity." Jonathan, not Evan. Of course it wasn't Evan. Of course the name was false. My heart hammered so hard I could feel my pulse in the base of my skull. "We'd simply like to understand," the voice continued calmly, "why he reached out, what he told you, and what you told him." My hand curled into a fist. This was worse than being caught. This was being watched, tracked, observed. And then the voice added, with a gentle certainty that made my skin crawl, "We know he spoke to you. We know you encouraged him." My throat went dry. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could hear was my own heartbeat roaring like a warning siren. "We only want clarification," the man said softly, "so that we can guide him back to spiritual safety." I forced air into my lungs. I forced my voice not to break. "I can't discuss callers," I said. "Legally." The man chuckled quietly, not amused, knowing. "Legality," he murmured, "is a worldly concern." I hung up. My hand shook so hard the phone nearly fell from my grip. My apartment felt suddenly too small, too exposed, too unsafe, like the walls themselves were listening. That was the moment the collapse completed. Not with the lost call, but with this one. Because in that moment I realized I had not just failed to save him, I had made myself visible to them. And visibility in their world is a threat, a sin, a claim, a target. I sat on the floor, knees pulled to my chest, rocking slightly as the adrenaline crashed. The room tilted. My hands went numb. My breath refused to slow. Somewhere in the spinning, shaking chaos of my body, a single truth broke through. I am not okay. And worse, I don't know if he's alive. The night after the call from the man who wasn't Evan, the man who knew too much, the man who spoke with that eerie calm only learned through control, something inside me tore. There wasn't a sound, no snap, no gasp, just a quiet, internal shift, the kind that feels like the floor beneath your life moves half an inch to the left, and suddenly nothing fits where it used to. For the first time since I opened the hotline, I didn't wait by the phone. I didn't sit at the kitchen table. I didn't touch the notebook or open the laptop. I sat on the floor with my back against the couch, knees pulled to my chest, hands pressed to my face, and I whispered into the dim, "Please, stop." I wasn't talking to God, not really. I wasn't even talking to the cult I escaped. I was talking to the past, the one that keeps returning like a tide, the one that slips through cracks, the one that doesn't care how many years you've survived. People think trauma lives in the mind. It doesn't. It lives in the body, in the spine, in the shoulders, in the instinctive flinch when someone speaks in a tone you heard every day for years. That night, my body remembered everything. My ribs ached like they had after hours of kneeling prayers. My mouth tasted like fear, metallic, bitter, old. My palms tingled with the memory of clutching a hymnal so tight the edges left cuts. I curled into myself, shaking slowly, not violently, just that deep, quiet shiver that comes from somewhere beneath consciousness, as if your bones are saying, "We know this. We've been here before." It wasn't the man's words that triggered it. It was his certainty. The way he spoke like truth wasn't something to seek, but something he owned. That tone has power. I was raised on it. I was broken by it. I was shaped inside it until I didn't know where the doctrine ended and I began. So when I heard it again, years later, on a phone I should never have answered, my body did what it always used to do. It obeyed. It curled. It folded. It prepared for punishment. I didn't call anyone. I didn't message my sister. I didn't tell my supervisor the truth. I didn't want to be saved. Because the awful, embarrassing human truth is this: I didn't believe I deserved to be saved. Not after what happened to him. Not after the line I crossed. I whispered into the dark, "I failed him." And the sentence felt familiar. Too familiar. It was the same one I whispered at 19 when another girl in the compound tried to run and was dragged back by her hair. When the leader told us we should have seen the signs. When the community forced us to kneel for hours, begging forgiveness for doubt we didn't know we had. "Your faith failed her," he said. "You didn't pray hard enough." I carried that guilt for years, buried it deep. But guilt has a long memory. It sees itself in every new mistake. And now here it was again, reborn in the shape of this missing boy, this frightened voice, this stranger I named Evan because he needed a name. "I failed him," I repeated, and my voice cracked in the exact place it used to crack when I confessed my so-called sins. At 3:14 a.m., my personal phone lit up. A message, not a call, from a number I didn't recognize. My heart lurched so violently I felt dizzy. My thumb hovered over the screen. I opened it. It wasn't him, but it was someone from the network, a data manager who tracked hotline metrics, someone who barely knew me. The message was short. "You've logged 82 hours this week. Please take a mandatory rest day. This is not a request." The words blurred. My throat tightened. Someone was watching. Someone noticed. Someone saw I was slipping. And instead of relief, I felt shame. Not because they caught me working too hard, but because rest felt like a luxury I didn't deserve when someone out there might be suffering because of me. I curled tighter and whispered into the quiet, "I don't know how to stop." Sleep came only when my body collapsed under its own exhaustion, and when it came violently. Dreams, yes, but not normal ones. Not symbolic, metaphor-laced nightmares you can unpack later. No, these were reenactments, live replays, memory stitched into dream logic until both became unbearable. I was back in the compound, back under the leader's gaze, back in the cold hallway where confessions echoed like ritual chants, back in the yard where a fence looked both inches and miles away. I heard my own 19-year-old voice saying, "I want to leave." And I heard his voice, Evan's, Jonathan's, whoever he was, saying it too, layered over mine, merged,
indistinguishable. When I woke, my cheeks were wet. My throat was raw. The blanket was tangled around my legs like restraints. Morning came, but nothing felt morning lit. Everything looked gray, dim, wrong. And I understood something in that moment, something sharp, something terrifying, something I had avoided naming for years. I wasn't healed. I was functional. That's different. That's survival, not recovery. That evening, with the hotline minutes from opening, I did something I hadn't done since the day I escaped. I called my therapist. I didn't leave a polite message. I didn't try to disguise the tremble in my voice. I just said, I think I've done something wrong, and I think I might fall apart if I don't tell someone. She didn't ask for details of her voicemail. She simply said, come in first thing tomorrow. Those 7 words felt like a crack in the wall of the room I'd locked myself in. That night, for the first time since the storm, I didn't open the hotline at 11:03. I sat at the table with the phone turned face down. I stared at the wood grain, following the lines with my fingers like prayer beads. And then, in a voice barely above a whisper, I confessed the truth aloud. Not to a leader, not to a doctrine, not to a God I'm still not sure is listening, but to myself. I tried to save him because no one saved me, and I don't know how to forgive myself. Saying it felt like exhaling for the first time in years. It felt like cracking a window in a room where the air had grown poisonous. It felt like an admission my soul had been begging me to release. The silence that followed wasn't the terrifying kind this time. It was a settling, a grounding, a quiet that didn't swallow me, but held me. For the first time in days, I slept. Not well, not peacefully, but without the sense that the walls were closing in, without the feeling that I needed to stay awake to atone. And in that fragile, exhausted sleep, something small shifted. The first hint of forgiveness. Not for him, not for them, but for me. Healing never arrives with fanfare. It doesn't announce itself, doesn't knock on your door carrying apologies or absolution. For me, healing came in on a Tuesday morning, uneventful, plain, a sky the color of dishwater, street traffic humming like a lullaby I'd forgotten I knew. I sat in my therapist's office, same worn armchair, same soft lamp, same painting of a river flowing nowhere in particular, and I told her everything. Not the polished version, not the version shaped for reports, the real one, the obsession, the indulgence, the line I crossed, the silence that followed, the man who called, the voice that chilled my bones, and the confession I hadn't known how to say aloud until now. I thought saving him would save me. She didn't flinch, didn't scold, didn't diagnose me into a box. She simply said, with a tenderness I didn't expect to hurt this much, you can care deeply without carrying blame. You can help without becoming responsible for someone's entire life. That boundary isn't cruelty, it's compassion for both of you. Her words didn't fix me, but they steadied me, like a hand on the small of my back, reminding me I existed outside the crisis. That night, I opened the hotline again, not out of compulsion, not out of dread, out of choice. I placed the phone on the table. I sat down with both feet on the ground, and for the first time since all of this began, I let myself breathe before the first ring. When it finally buzzed, I didn't hope it was him. I didn't fear it either. I simply answered, "Hotline, this is Lila." It wasn't Evan. It wasn't Jonathan. It was a woman in her 40s, voice cracking as she tried to describe the community her daughter had joined.
"This isn't her," she whispered. "I don't know how to reach her." And something in me calmed, softly, slowly, like the settling of snow. I listened. I guided her through the fear, and I stayed within the lines, not out of caution, but out of respect for both of us. She cried. I didn't. Not this time. When the call ended, I closed my eyes and let the room be still. No panic, no shaking, just presence. A quiet I could finally stand inside. In the days that followed, I changed small things, not big ones. Big changes are too dramatic. Their weight collapses you before they heal you. Small ones endure. I moved the hotline binder to a different drawer, still close, but not on the table like an altar. I threw out the half-finished mugs, the ones that marked the nights I didn't sleep. I watered my plants until their leaves found the light again.
I bought groceries that didn't fit the survival mindset. Fruit, soft bread, honey I didn't need but wanted. I gave myself permission to want, just a little. And when I passed the mirror in the hallway, I paused. I waited for the 19-year-old ghost, for the eyes full of obedience and fear. She didn't appear, just me, older, still tired, but standing. I whispered to my reflection, not dramatically, not for effect, just because it felt right. I'm still here. A quiet victory, a real one. People ask if I ever heard from him again, if Evan or Jonathan or whatever his name truly was ever called back. The truth is, no. Sometimes hotlines get miracles, sometimes they get answers. Sometimes survivors reach the other side and find the courage to say, I made it. But sometimes the story ends mid-sentence. Sometimes the line cuts. Sometimes the silence becomes a final chapter you never get to read. For a long time, that absence hollowed me out. Now it lives with me in a different way, not as a wound, but as a reminder that kindness isn't a transaction. It doesn't promise results. It doesn't guarantee closure. I still think of him, not obsessively, not painfully, just quietly, like a name written in pencil on a page I no longer tear through. Wherever he is, I hope he's breathing. I hope he's safe. I hope he found a crack in the fence big enough to slip through, or someone who held a light steady for him when I no longer could. But I no longer tie my worth to his survival. His story is his. Mine is mine. And the only thing I can do is honor the part where our paths crossed. It's midnight as I say this. The hotline is open. The lamp is warm. My apartment is quiet in the way homes are supposed to be quiet. Not suffocating, not haunted, just still. The phone rings. A new voice, a new story, a new person standing at the edge of a truth they're terrified to name. I don't know if I can leave, the caller whispers, and I say, with all the gentleness I've fought hard to reclaim, you don't have to know yet. Just stay with me for now. Not more, not less. No promises I can't keep. Just presence. Just breath. Just the soft, imperfect shape of mercy. I don't know what redemption means anymore. Not the cinematic kind, not the religious kind, not even the therapeutic kind, if I'm honest. But I know what acceptance feels like. It feels like this. This chair. This moment. This quiet return to myself. And somewhere in the silence that follows the call, I think, not believe, not insist, just think that maybe God really does pick up, even if all we hear is the quiet.